Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. Open and honest discussions with wise and skillful teachers about their experiences with life, death, and Buddhism. If you wonder how others on the path have dealt with death and dying and grief, then be sure to listen in. Everybody has a story, a perspective, and a valuable lesson to share. Embrace death, live a full life, and learn how to love impermanence. Because as my dear father used to say, nobody gets out of this alive. Hi there, it's time for Death Dhamma Ahas and Lessons Learned with Venerable D. I have known Venerable D since about 2010. We met at University of the West. We were classmates there together. And I was always impressed by how open and friendly he was in all the appropriate ways, because he is a Buddhist monk. But I found him to be very extroverted and that he really got along well with others and was definitely someone who would make people feel at home and comfortable and definitely be open to lots of good discussion with the people around him. We had a professor, Dr. Lewis Lancaster by name, who had done some work visiting prisons and teaching Buddhism in the prisons. And he brought that work to University of the West and told some of us about it. And three of us, Venerable D and I being two of the three, really felt called to move that forward. And so Venerable D is one of the founding members of the Engaged Buddhist Alliance. And you can read more about that work at engagedbuddhistalliance.org. It is a nonprofit. And Venerable D really found his calling in the prison Dharma. And he is really a person who believes in helping others through his learnings as a Buddhist monk. And he doesn't believe that people who might be cast aside by others or who might be perceived to be in a lower state or to have poor karma because they are incarcerated, he doesn't believe that those are people who are a waste of his time. No, he believes those people are very much worthy of his time. And he... Now, I'm talking to you right now. We're still in a shutdown from COVID-19. So prior to this, Venerable D probably spent 4 or 5 days a week visiting California state prisons, men's and women's, and teaching the Dharma, meditating with a group and teaching the Dharma. And sometimes he would be at a prison all day long, visiting all 4 of the yards. And the people that he visited were so pleased that a Buddhist monk would be able to spend time with them, and the teachings that he gives to them are so down to earth and so helpful. And again, he is a person who finds that helping people in prison to be beyond worthy of his time, as he reminds me, because there is a location that I have gone with him to visit and teach also. He reminds me every time as we leave, there's just that feeling of we learn so much more from visiting these men and women in prison. Circling back to Death Dhamma, my discussion with Venerable D was so helpful. There are some things that we've gone through together as colleagues and friends. And there are some things that he experienced that he shared with me and with all of you that I didn't know about. When his mother passed away, I did attend the services, one of the sets of services for his mother. And it was so nice to see the whole family pulling together. And something that Venerable D taught me was that in those services, every family member, down to the tiniest of grandchildren, had a role. And there was so much value in everyone having a part to play in order to honor their mother or their aunt or their grandmother. And it was really warm and poignant to observe that. But perhaps one of the biggest takeaways from my discussion with Venerable D is his ability to speak freely to us about the fact that he experienced abuse in his background. His father was emotionally and physically abusive to his children and was the hardest on Venerable D, probably because he was the oldest. And Venerable D experienced being yelled at and beaten for many years. And I suppose in a way, maybe he escaped that when he escaped Vietnam, when his parents put him on a boat with his younger brother, where they eventually found their way to a refugee camp, and then found their way to the United States in Ohio, where, my gosh, it was cold in the winter and snowy, and it was strange. And Venerable D, at the ripe old age of 17 or 18, had to learn to speak a new language, go to high school, get a job to pay the rent and put food on the table, and try to be a parent to his younger brother. So he is a person of tremendous strength, resourcefulness, and resilience. But this background of trauma and abuse is something that was with him for so many years. And he shares that when his father died, when his abuser died, he did feel sadness and he did cry. And then as he transitioned further into his grief, he came face to face with the trauma that he suffered from his abuser. And he came face to face with feeling guilt and shame and relief that his father was gone, and hurt and anger. And he tells us that. And, when he speaks in prison, he's very honest about that as well with our incarcerated men and women, which is very important because so many of them come from a background of addiction and abuse. And what Venerable D points out is that there are many stages of going through trauma, and it will come find you. And you want to sit with it, and you want to breathe into it. And if you are a person whose loved one has died, but that loved one didn't act like a loved one, you're not a bad Buddhist if you feel relief that they're gone. And you're not a bad Buddhist if meditating doesn't make the trauma go away. It's good to get help. And yes, you can go to your Buddhist practice for help. And you need to start with yourself and with letting yourself go through feeling the grief and trauma as it arises in your body. And you need to offer yourself self-compassion. And then one day, with the help of your practice and possibly with therapy as well, you may find yourself in the position where you're able to no longer feel anxiety or anger or disappointment in the one who abused you. But this is not something that happens overnight. And so it is important to be patient. Today, after several years, Venerable D can look at a picture of his late father and he can wish him only freedom from suffering. But it's a path. And it's a long path, so be patient with yourself. Something that Venerable D reminds us of throughout our discussion of navigating the loss of parents and the loss of an abuser and trauma and the grief and the sadness we both felt when both our parents were gone and we had a feeling of being orphaned, is don't forget the power of focusing on the breath. Sometimes it might become a catchphrase, right? Focus on the breath. But the reason it's such an important phrase is because it's such an important and powerful tool for us. Those are some of the many things that I've learned, and I get the benefit of Venerable D being my colleague and my friend, and I will continue to be learning from him for as long as we are both here. This has been the Death Dhamma podcast with Margaret Meloni. Thank you for being here. Your reviews and comments are greatly appreciated, And please come find me on margaretmeloni.com. MargaretMeloni. And don't forget to check out Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless. Available in all your favorite formats over on Amazon. And most importantly, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be safe, at ease, and free from suffering. Bye for now.